Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're honored to have our Undersecretary with us, Richard Fordyce. Richard Fordyce worked with myself in Trump 45 when I was DAP. Lucky enough to work with him again. So, Richard, I'm going to let you open things up and kick us off. So, Richard, take it away.
Okay, Bill. Well, thank you. And would echo Bill's opening comment. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. And thanks for joining this webinar. Today, we're going to talk about TAP and the Tree Assistance Program. The reason I wanted to come on and just say hi and kind of kick this off is a couple of weeks ago, the administrator and I were in Pennsylvania, and we were at some orchards a couple of different times, and at the Penn State Tree Fruit Research Center, and got a chance to talk to producers about the impact of the late April freeze and what the impacts were to their orchards, to their businesses, frankly. And we were able to share some insight related to the Tree Assistance Program and what's available there. And I think there are some components of the Tree Assistance Program that maybe folks aren't 100% aware of. And so we wanted to bring this group together, talk about that, and really kind of highlight some of the standing provisions in the program, and maybe some newer provisions that were a result of the Working Families Tax Cuts Act. And so I do think it's important. The Farm Service Agency has a number of disaster programs that stand ready to respond after a natural disaster. And this is an example of one. And I think if I were to be 100% honest, Bill and Jamie, I probably learned a little bit about TAP myself when we were in Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago. Again, everyone who's on the call, thank you for being a part of the call. Thank you for certainly your interest in the program, and again, being a part of the webinar. So with that, I think, Jamie, do I turn it over to you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Undersecretary, and thank you for joining us and kicking off the call today. My name's Jamie White. I serve as an assistant to our Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs, Mr. Jared Haggart. I do have just a couple of housekeeping items to walk through before we get over to the meat of the program today. For everyone's situational awareness, we are recording this webinar today, and that's going to allow us to distribute this recording after the call to all of you who are able to join us, and for those stakeholders who are not able to join us today as well. Additionally, we will take questions throughout the presentation. As you have questions, please access the Q&A option at the top of the Teams window and drop those Q&As in the chat, or the questions in the chat. And as we walk to the end of the call, or as we close out the call, we will walk through those questions and answer those in today's session where possible. If there aren't any if there are questions that we don't get to at the end of today's session, we will follow up with those in writing. Without further ado, I would like to turn the floor over to Janae Orso, who serves as our Tree Assistance Program Manager here at FSA, and she is going to walk through again that broader overview of the TAP program, the applicability, and then we'll certainly embrace and discuss the important enhancements authorized by the Working Families Tax Cut Act, or oftentimes referred to as OBA, or the One Big Beautiful Bill. So Janae, I'll kick things over to you, ma'am.
All right, so as a quick overview, TAP provides disaster assistance to eligible orchardists and nursery tree growers to replant or rehabilitate the tree, bushes, and vines that have been lost due to natural disasters, and who commercially raise the perennial trees for production of an annual crop. So that's just a quick, brief synopsis of what we cover for TAP. So our eligible producers for TAP, orchardists and nursery tree growers, they must have tree, bushes, and vines that were directly affected by a natural disaster and that were continually owned in the commercial operation for tree, bushes, and vines from the time of the disaster event until the time of the application. We do have some acreage limitations under TAP. So we are limited to a cumulative total of 1,000 acres annually under TAP. And then that, along with that, does require us to have a CCC or an FSA 578 on file for the TAP program. Some other general provisions for payment eligibility. Average adjusted gross income does apply to the TAP program. The average adjusted gross income is the 900,000 limitation. And now we do have the ability to use the CCC 943, which is the 75% exception. And that means that if more than an average income is from farming and ranching, if 75% of more of that average income is from farming, ranching, or silviculture activities, then the producer could still be eligible for TAP, even though they have exceeded the $900,000 limit under the program. Another eligibility provision, we do have to have a 1026 on file for the HELC, the highly erodible land and wetland provisions. And then also direct attribution will apply, which would require the producer to file a CCC 902. As far as payment limitations, there are no payment limitations for the TAP program. All right, some eligibility for eligibility losses under TAP. The tree, bush, or vine must have reached mortality, which means it had died, above and below the ground as a result of the natural disaster. And it must have sustained a loss in excess of just normal mortality. The damage must be visible and obvious to a COC representative, which is our county office committees, and they may require information from a qualified expert to determine a loss extent if it is due to plant disease or an insect infestation. Also, under eligible losses, we talked about the tree must have had died. So if a tree, bush, or vine is damaged to such extent that is no longer commercially viable, then the tree, bush, or vine may be considered dead in determining the normal mortality loss threshold. All right, so some of our reimbursement rates under the TAP program for replanting and the cost of seedlings or cuttings for tree replacement is the lesser of either of the following. We have the 65%, which is the actual cost of the practice. So it's the actual cost, and then we take 65%. Or the total amount calculated using rates established by DAFB for the practice. And then if applicable, for the cost of pruning, removal, and other costs incurred for salvaging existing tree, bushes, or vines, or in the case of mortality, to prepare the land to replant the tree, bushes, or vines, is also the lesser of the following. 65% of the actual cost of the practice, or the amount calculated using rates established by DAFB for the practice. And this is the portion right here on this screen that would be considered what we would most likely call the rehabilitation portion of the reimbursement. As I just mentioned, that was the rehabilitation portion. Eligibility for rehabilitation. So if there is tree damage, tree loss in excess of normal mortality. So if you had damage to the trees and you also had experienced your loss mortality in excess of normal mortality, which must be met, then payments for the pruning, removing, and other costs incurred for salvaging existing trees is the 65%, or the amount calculated by DAFB. All right, so the payment calculations. So after an applicant has qualified for TAP, meeting the normal mortality, then we would look at how a payment is calculated for TAP. And it's the lesser of the two following calculations. So we would take for the first calculation, the actual cost of the receipts times the applicant's share times the percent payment level, which we just went over at the 65%, which would equal the total payment. Or it would be the total determined tree loss, tree damage, and acres times applicant share times practice payment rate, and that would equal the total payment. And I listed the tree loss, damage, and acres because we would do a separate calculation for each of those should they apply to the applicant's calculation. the next one. I'm going to jump too far. Sorry, again, we're hitting a little bit of a delay. Okay, I don't want to jump too far ahead of you guys, but I'm going to go ahead and continue just for time's sake if I can pull it back up on my other screen here. And that way we don't run out of time in our presentation. And once it catches up, we'll get back to that if we can. So, let's go and grab it. My apologies. Present for just 1 second. Uh-oh, did I drop?
Janae, you are still with us.
Okay,
And
good.
the
It
screen
made
did
it sound
roll.
like it dropped. Did it go forward?
It had gone forward and then I believe it went backward. Forgive
Okay.
us, everyone. We are experiencing some
My
network issues
apologies.
and
Yes,
we
it
are
is frozen on my
experiencing some network
screen.
issues.
Yes, I'm going to stop her sharing for just 1 moment and see if resharing will help again in that situation. Right, let me reshare here and see if it'll catch back up with me. There we go. All right, one more thumbs up if I can get one to say we are now sharing again. All right, perfect. Okay, practice expiration change. All right, so eligible owners must complete their approved practice replacement and rehabilitation practices within 24 months from the date the CCC 899, and now we have the 2026 as our new form, Part E is approved for payment by our COC or the designee. And I say expiration change because prior to the Western Family Tax Cut Act, we had a 12-month expiration on the practices. So we have now extended that to 24 months as a discretionary change within that. And if the applicant is unable to complete approved practices within 24 months from the date that the application is approved, then we can allow for a 36-month extension. Of that 36 months, the state committees can grant the first 12 additional months. And then after that, it would just have to come up to our DAFP level for additional extensions up to the 24 months, which would equal out our 36 months total. Okay. So as that, a recap of our TAP changes. So to kind of go through what the exact changes were for 2026. Working Family Tax Cut Act changes, we removed the 15% of the mortality loss threshold. So now to be eligible for TAP, the participants just have to meet normal mortality as a loss. No more 15% plus normal mortality. And this is just applicable, one more time, to 2026 and forward for program years. So that would be losses incurring after January 1st of 2026. By doing that, it also increases the portion of producers' loss, damage, or trees, bushes, or vines may receive assistance. As in our payment calculation, we take into account the mortality loss of the trees when calculating how many trees are eligible, and as well as how many acres are eligible for payment. Therefore, by reducing it down to just normal mortality, that therefore increases the amount that a producer would be eligible for by the number of trees or number of acres. It also increased the reimbursement percentage from 50% to 65% for those rehabilitation practices like the cost of pruning, removal, and other costs of salvaging existing trees, bushes, or vines, or in the case of mortality, to prepare the land for replanting. And then it also allowed us the 75% AGI exception rule to be applicable to TAP when looking at that average just gross income of $900,000. So our CCC changes that came along with that, and we implemented our Family Tax Cut Act. We extended the time for participants to execute the TAP applications from the 12 months to the 24 months. once the application is approved. And then also gives us the opportunity to extend that up to 36 months, should it be due to a circumstance beyond the applicant's control, that they are unable to complete those practices within the first 24 months, that we can go up to the 36 months on extensions. Those extensions, just as a quick cap on those, do have to be written requests. So we have to make sure that if a producer cannot, for some unforeseen reason, complete the practice in the first 24 months after approval, that they do come in and ask for that extension in writing. And then the state committee has the authority to approve that first 20 or 12 months extension. And then if there's a need for any extension beyond that, then the producer could request an additional extension of up to additional 24 months. And that would just come up to the DAFP level. All right, Jamie, and then I don't know, for questions, I want to open it up for questions.
Janae, there aren't any questions in the chat quite yet. We'll give folks a few minutes to drop questions that they would like us to walk through. One item that may be helpful, again, just to amplify, recognizing that there are changes specific to 2026 for the Tree Assistance Program, and we rolled out those changes or announced those changes in early July. Would you please briefly just touch on the expanded application period to allow producers to access those critical TAP benefits?
Yes, as you said, Jamie, we're going to go ahead and extend that out 90 days from when the rule published, to allow producers to come in, and if they say they didn't apply because of the fact that the AGI limitation applied to them and they were over the $900,000, so chose not to apply for a TAP, this extension period will allow them to come in and apply for a TAP and file that CCC 943 as well to maintain their eligibility for payment. It also allows producers to come in that chose not to apply for a TAP because they did not meet the 15% normal mortality loss threshold, but they do now meet just the normal mortality threshold. We're allowing that 90-day extension time period to allow producers to come in and file an application, even if it's beyond the date loss of parent or the 90 days from the date. 90 days from the date loss of parent or from the disaster event. So it gives an extra 90 days if the producer has already passed their window of opportunity to be eligible for the program per the program provisions, due to the new provisions we have in place with the 75% rule or the 15% being removed from that mortality rate.
Thank you, Janae. And for the broader group with us today, we want to take the opportunity to amplify and share that state and county offices have been trained on the updated provisions applicable to TAP. We did conduct training immediately upon publication of the rule in the Federal Register. So state and county offices do have the tools and resources to support producers that have been impacted by eligible disaster conditions. Are there any other closing comments you would like to share, specifically knowing that we have many folks throughout the United States, specifically, again, those in the Northeast, impacted by freeze that may be new to TAP? Just tips and tricks to point folks in the right direction to access benefits for which they would be eligible, Janae.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, definitely go into your local, FSA county office. We can take applications nationwide in our system. So it's imperative, to get into an office and let them know of your loss immediately. As soon as you know you've suffered a loss or, have some damage out on your trees, to please contact us so we can get our loss adjusters out there. For the TAP program, we do use loss adjusters as in the NAP program. So we will send somebody out to assess your damage and make sure we have the paperwork flowing and know of your loss, and we can get that going and provide you that assistance. And then just make sure to, eligibility documents, start filing those with the local office, and just keep in contact, good contact with our offices. As soon as you know you have a loss, come in and visit with us, and we can get the TAP application rolling. There is also one more provision, Jamie, and I think I skipped on some slides when I switched over real quick, just on plant disease. I know that's a big thing too with the freeze. Plant disease is eligible as a loss itself. Now that we're at the 3%, I think with plant disease, we could reach it a lot faster. We do have provisions to allow for a cumulative loss period. So if it takes a period of time for that plant disease from the time of onset of symptom or onset of the disease to show the symptoms or accumulate that loss mortality, we do have a provision that allows for accumulation of losses over a period of time. So just make sure to come in and visit our offices, your local offices. We'll know if we have an accumulative period already established, or work with our state offices to get our state committees to request an accumulative period if it is needed. I'm really hoping with the with the normal mortality rate, we can reach that potentially without having to do that extra step. But it is a provision that allows us to carry it out over more than 1 year of losses to get to that normal mortality should it be needed. Just a couple things. I know we jumped on in a couple of screens when I lost my computer for a second.
Thank you, Janae, for sharing that important clarification and update. And again, just to reiterate what Janae indicated, if producers have suffered losses, if they've had trees, bushes, or vines that are adversely affected by disaster, it's best to have that conversation with local office staff. We don't want folks leaving or not accessing benefits for which they would have been eligible by making individual eligibility determinations, but really lean on our experts at the local office to assist with that process and to help work through the documentation requirements. And the one question that has been dropped in the chat, thank you. We have received a question specific to the slides and whether or not we can share these slides to share with producers or to support more engagement and outreach. And that is certainly something that we can do. So we'll coordinate with all of those individuals that received the invite to this presentation. We will also distribute those slides as well. So great question. We'll be sure to do that. As we don't have any additional questions in the chat, I believe we can go ahead and close out this call. Again, thank you all for your attendance. Thank you for your patience and grace as we work through some of the network challenges that we're experiencing here today. And again, we will distribute a recording of this stakeholder briefing. We will also provide a copy of the slides for your distillation as well. And as always, if there are any questions after the call today, please do not hesitate to reach out via the contact information that you all received when the stakeholder briefing was shared and distributed. Thank you all and have a great day.